Have you ever felt an unexplained pull towards someone, not because of what they said, not even because of how they looked, but because of something far deeper, something you couldn't quite name? It's a feeling that lingers long after the moment passes, a glance that unsettled you, a goodbye that echoed louder than the relationship itself, and you find yourself asking, why does she stay on my mind? Why her? Carl Jung might answer with a truth that turns our understanding of love inside out. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with the parts of ourselves they awaken. What we call chemistry may be nothing less than our unconscious mind recognizing something sacred, something symbolic. In today's video, we're diving into a profound insight that most relationship advice overlooks. We're not here to talk about attraction in the usual sense. We won't discuss surface behaviors, tactics, or how to win someone's heart. Instead, we're going to explore the psychological blueprint behind why a man falls in love and why many women never notice the real moment it happens. This isn't a cliché love story. It's a journey into the psyche. Jung believed that love often begins not in the heart, but in the unconscious mind, the invisible arena where symbols live, archetypes rise, and our deepest wounds search for healing. Sometimes when a woman simply lives in her truth, without trying to be chosen, without manipulating or pleasing, she unknowingly activates something ancient in a man. He sees her not just as a partner, but as a mirror that reflects his anima, the inner feminine he's yet to integrate. And in that moment, love becomes transformation. Not always easy, rarely convenient, but unforgettable. If you've ever been in a relationship where things seemed fine on the outside, but suddenly the man pulled away or grew obsessed without explanation, this video may offer answers that go far beyond standard dating logic. Because when a woman becomes a symbol, she no longer plays by the rules of reality. She stirs the soul, and that can either inspire awakening or trigger fear. So if you've ever wondered why a man fell hard and then disappeared, why your quiet strength became unforgettable, or why your absence felt louder than your presence, stay with us. By the end of this video, you may discover that you weren't just someone he dated. You were a threshold, a moment his unconscious couldn't unsee. Let us know in the comments if any of this resonates. And if you're ready to explore the deeper psychology of love identity and soul connections, hit the subscribe button and join us on this journey inward. Because love isn't just about finding the right person, it's about remembering who we truly are. What makes a man fall in love? And more importantly, what makes that love linger, even after the relationship fades? You may think it's how you looked, how you made him feel, or how much effort you put into the relationship. But as Jung taught us, what we think is often just the surface. The real answers lie deeper hidden within the unconscious. When a man meets a woman and feels a sudden, unexplainable pull, it's not always about her personality or beauty. It's often because she unknowingly activates something within him that he has long forgotten or repressed. Something Jung called the anima, the feminine part of his psyche that seeks integration. This isn't about femininity in the traditional sense. It's about qualities that society often teaches men to suppress: emotional intuition, vulnerability, receptivity, softness, inner reflection. These traits exist within every man, but they are frequently pushed into the shadows. And what is repressed in the psyche does not disappear, it seeks expression in other ways. Enter you. Without realizing it, you may have embodied the emotional freedom he didn't know he lacked. Perhaps your presence stirred a part of him that hadn't felt seen in years. Perhaps your silence spoke to him more powerfully than any conversation. You didn't try to control him, and that terrified and mesmerized him all at once. Why? because for the first time, he wasn't being mirrored by someone who needed him, but by someone who was whole within herself. And that reflection was confronting. According to Jung, when we encounter someone who embodies a piece of our own unconscious, we often fall in love not with them, but with the part of ourselves they awaken. This is the beginning of archetypal projection. The woman becomes a symbol, a mirror, a vessel through which his deeper psyche speaks. But here lies the paradox: the more real you are, the more symbolic you become. It's not your makeup, your outfit, or your carefully chosen words that captivate him. It's your calm, your clarity, your grounded energy. The fact that you do not chase or beg, that you do not mold yourself to his approval, but instead remain rooted in your own essence. The consciously or not represents something he has yet to access in himself. And this is why some men pull away just when the connection feels strongest. Because to stay would mean to change. To stay would mean he must face the parts of himself he has avoided: his fears, his wounds, his inability to love without needing control. And many aren't ready for that. But this is not a failure. This is a revelation. You may have thought the relationship ended because you weren't enough. But Jung would say you were too much, not in volume or drama, but in symbolic truth. You were the mirror, and most people aren't ready to see their reflection in full. So, when he thinks of you later, not with anger, but with a quiet ache, it isn't because he misses your words or your smile. It's because you brought him to the edge of a transformation he wasn't yet prepared to make. And if you're wondering why you've been hard to forget even to him, it's not because you tried too hard. It's because you didn't try at all. You simply were, and that kind of presence is unforgettable. There is a strange truth few people realize: the more you try to be chosen, the more invisible you become. And yet the moment you stop trying, when you simply are something in, you becomes unforgettable. Jung called this the awakening of the self, the core of our being, that exists beyond persona, beyond the masks we wear to survive in a world hungry for validation. In the modern world, women are taught to perform, smile more, be agreeable, don't take up too much space, and unconsciously, many begin to link love with effort. If I show him I care, he'll stay. If I give more, maybe he'll finally feel enough. But what Carl Jung invites us to see is that love doesn't emerge from control. It arises from presence. A woman who is connected to her inner self does not chase approval. She doesn't become smaller to make others comfortable. She knows that her value isn't in how useful she is to a man's ego, but in how loyal she remains to her essence. And ironically, that is what makes her magnetic. Why? Because most men have never encountered a woman who does not need them to feel complete. And when they do, something ancient stirs within them. Not attraction in the shallow sense, but fascination, confusion, even discomfort. She isn't demanding his attention, yet he can't stop thinking about her. She doesn't bend to his moods, yet her calm unnerves him more than any argument could. This is the power of archetypal energy. When a woman embodies the Anima not by trying to, but by living her truth, she reflects back to the man the part of himself he hasn't yet integrated. And that reflection creates a kind of psychic charge. It feels like love. It feels like destiny. But it's deeper. It's the soul asking to be seen. But here's what many don't realize: this energy cannot be faked. If you act detached to gain power, the energy collapses. The unconscious is not fooled by performance. Jung's work reminds us that the self doesn't respond to manipulation, it responds to alignment. So when your stillness is genuine, when your silence is not a tactic, but a result of inner peace, You become a mirror of psychological truth. And men especially, those who live in performance, are drawn to it. Not because they fully understand it, but because they crave it without knowing why. They return to the woman who wasn't afraid to walk away. They remember the one who didn't beg. They dream of the woman who sat in her sovereignty and never apologized for her wholeness. Not because she said the right thing, but because she was the right thing for their growth, not their comfort. This is not to romanticize detachment as coldness. Jung didn't promote emotional distance. He promoted conscious living. And a conscious woman doesn't detach out of fear. She lets go out of self-respect. She loves fully, but never abandons herself in the process. And that for many men is terrifying. Because love, when it's real, doesn't just comfort, it transforms. And transformation requires surrender. So the next time he pulls away, not knowing why your presence shook him, remember this. He wasn't just meeting you. He was meeting himself through you. And that kind of meeting is never forgotten. Here's a paradox we rarely speak aloud. A man can deeply long for love, yet flee the very woman who brings it to him. Not because she's wrong for him, but because she's right for his evolution, and that's far more terrifying than being left alone. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And in love, that resistance shows up in the strangest ways. One moment, he's drawn in. The next, he pulls away without reason. He ghosts, withdraws, or remains physically present, but emotionally unreachable. To the woman, it feels like rejection. But to Jung, it's a sign of something deeper. The unconscious shadow has been stirred. You see, when a woman carries presence, clarity, and calm confidence without trying to control, fix, or please, she disrupts a man's internal status quo. She becomes a mirror, not of who he is pretending to be, but of who he has not yet become. And that confrontation with the self is rarely comfortable. Why? Because most men, like most people, are trained to live on the surface. They know how to perform, they know how to provide, they know how to entertain. But they don't always know how to sit with discomfort, how to name their wounds, or how to be emotionally intimate without feeling exposed. So when a woman touches something real in him, not with words, but simply through her grounded presence, he often panics. Because what she evokes isn't just attraction. She evokes transformation, and transformation requires the death of the ego. Jung would describe this as the moment when the man's persona, his carefully constructed identity, begins to crack. The strong one, the provider, the emotionally detached man in control. Suddenly, none of those masks work. In her presence, he feels seen, not for what he projects, but for what he hides. That kind of seeing is not gentle. It is sacred, and it's also terrifying, because it forces a question most people spend years avoiding. Am I ready to meet the parts of myself I've buried? The truth is most are not. So he retreats not from the woman herself, but from the feeling she awakens, the vulnerability, the emotional depth, the quiet voice that says, "This could change you." And change, real change, always begins with destruction of illusions, defenses, and self-deception. This is why Jung taught that love is not just emotional, it's spiritual alchemy. It's the fire that burns away the false self so that the true self can emerge. And not everyone is ready for that fire. So if you're the woman he pulled away from, don't internalize it as inadequacy. Instead, understand that you may have been the catalyst, not the comfort, but the mirror. He may not have had the tools or the courage to face what he saw, but the fact that you reflected it means something profound. You were a turning point, maybe not in the form of a lifelong romance, but in the journey of his soul. And that kind of presence that's never forgotten Carl Jung believed that we do not truly see others as they are, we see them as projections of our own inner world. And nowhere is this more potent, more magnetic, or more misunderstood than in romantic relationships. Many women have experienced a sudden, powerful connection with a man who seems captivated, pulled toward her like gravity. He doesn't know why. She didn't do anything unusual. She wasn't trying to impress. Yet she becomes unforgettable to him. Why? Jung would call it archetypal projection. In that moment, the man is not merely falling for her physical presence or personality. He is unconsciously seeing a symbol and image of his own soul reflected back to him through her. This projection is often tied to what Jung called the anima, the feminine part of a man's psyche that remains largely hidden, unmet, or undeveloped. When a woman embodies qualities he hasn't yet integrated, emotional depth, intuitive calm, spiritual wholeness, she doesn't just attract him, she activates him. She stirs the waters of his unconscious. And to a man who's lived disconnected from that part of himself, she becomes more than a person. She becomes a mirror of his missing half. But here's the danger: he doesn't know it's happening. He mistakes the symbol for the woman. He believes he's falling in love with her, but in truth, he's falling in love with what she represents inside him. And that confusion can be as seductive as it is destructive. Because projection, when left unchecked, is never sustainable. Eventually, the real woman, flawed, evolving human will surface. And if he has not done the inner work to integrate those projected qualities, the illusion begins to crack. Disappointment creeps in. Confusion follows. Sometimes resentment. And she is left wondering, what changed? What changed is that she stopped being a symbol and started being a self. This is why Jung urged us to withdraw projections, not to stop loving, but to start loving consciously. Projection is a powerful doorway to growth, but only if we recognize it for what it is, an invitation, not a conclusion. So what can a woman do when she senses she's being projected onto? First, stay anchored in her authenticity. Don't shrink into the fantasy. Don't contort herself to match the ideal he's placing upon her. Instead, reflect it back. Ask, what is it you're drawn to in me, not to trap him, but to gently nudge his awareness inward? Second, protect her energy. When a man is activated but unready, he may unconsciously try to possess what he doesn't yet understand. He may push for closeness while resisting true connection. And if she absorbs that confusion, she may lose her center. She may start questioning herself. Don't. You are not responsible for carrying his shadow. You are not here to become someone's missing piece. You are here to embody your wholeness so that others may be inspired to find their own. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The key is to be willing to transform, not just to project. And when both people begin to do that, when they own their inner world instead of placing it on the other, love becomes not a search for completion, but a celebration of two sovereign souls meeting in awareness. So the next time a man is mesmerized by you, ask, not, what did I do, but what part of him did I awaken? That's not seduction. That's psychological alchemy, and it is sacred. There's a silent crisis happening in many modern relationships. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with betrayal or yelling. Instead, it begins when one person starts carrying the emotional weight of two. It begins when a woman, sensing the distance in her partner, tries harder to close the gap. She listens more attentively. She softens her tone. She explains herself again and again, trying to be understood. She reads between his silences, searching for meaning. She takes responsibility for his moods, tiptoeing around his reactions. And slowly, invisibly, she begins to disappear from her own center. Carl Jung would have called this a collapse into the persona, the social mask we wear to maintain harmony and receive love. But when the mask becomes our identity, we don't just lose connection with others, we lose connection with the self. Emotional overfunctioning is not care. It is not devotion. It is often a trauma-informed survival strategy rooted in the fear that if we don't manage everything, hearts, moods, conversations, we will be abandoned. But here's the paradox. The more we try to hold the relationship together alone, the more it starts to unravel. Because love cannot be sustained by one person rowing the boat, while the other sits quietly unsure if they even want to be at sea. When a woman falls into this pattern, she isn't just exhausting herself. She's denying her own soul its rightful place in the relationship. She becomes so focused on how he feels, what he thinks, how to say things the right way, that she forgets to ask, what do I feel? What do I need? What does my body say when I'm with him? This is not selfishness. This is psychological self-responsibility. Jung taught that healing begins the moment we reclaim projection, not just of our desires, but of our fears. When a woman believes that her worth is tied to how well she loves, how much she gives, how tirelessly she shows up, she is not loving from wholeness. She is loving from wounding. And wounded love always comes with an expiration date. So how do we begin to break the pattern? We return to the self, that deeper instinctive center within us that knows when something is out of balance, even before the mind can make sense of it. We listen to the subtle tension in our bodies, the quiet fatigue in our hearts. We stop asking how to fix him and start asking how to realign with ourselves. Sometimes this means doing less, not more. It means letting the silence hang instead of filling it with words. It means letting him feel the distance instead of rescuing him from it. It means trusting that your calm presence, your grounded energy is enough, and that your needs are not burdens, they are sacred signals from the soul. The mature feminine does not force intimacy. She does not manipulate connection. She invites it by being so deeply rooted in herself that any man who steps into her life must meet her there or not at all. Because love, when it is real, does not require abandonment of the self. It demands the integration of it. So if you've been the woman who overfunctioned, who tried harder every time he tried less, who molded herself into whatever was needed just to keep things going, breathe. You are allowed to come home now, back to yourself. Because that is where true love that sees, respects, and reciprocates actually begins. What draws a man to a woman truly deeply is not just her beauty, her warmth, or even her intellect. It is something older, something more primal, something he cannot name. It is mystery, and not the kind that plays games or withholds affection. The mystery that awakens him is psychological, not performative. It's the presence of a woman who lives within herself, not for the gaze or expectations of others. Carl Jung believed that each man carries within him an inner feminine, the Anima. She is not just a concept, she is a force. She represents emotion, intuition, depth, and imagination. But in many men, the Anima is buried unacknowledged. And because what is unconscious seeks expression, men often project this inner figure outward onto women. This is why a man may feel magnetically drawn to a woman who isn't trying to impress him, who simply is. He sees in her something he has lost touch with in himself. She becomes not just a person, but a symbol. And this is where the real psychological drama begins. Because falling in love in its deepest sense isn't about possession. It's about confrontation with the parts of ourselves that we have yet to integrate. So when a man meets a woman who unconsciously mirrors his anima, he doesn't just feel attraction. He feels disruption, an inner stirring, a sense that something dormant in him has just been awakened. He may not understand why he can't stop thinking about her, why her absence feels louder than her presence ever did, why he dreams of her years after she has gone. But Jung would say it is not her hes chasing. It's what she activated a part of himself that he can no longer ignore. The feminine mystery is not confusing because it is manipulative. It is confusing because it holds a mirror to the masculine unconscious. And in that mirror, he sees everything he has avoided: his vulnerability, his need for connection, his longing for meaning, his fear of surrender. And so some men run, not because the woman is too much, but because she is too true, too alive, too symbolic of the journey he has yet to take. Yet the woman who embodies this mystery does not chase. She does not explain. She trusts. She knows that if the man is ready, he will meet her in that space of depth and self-awareness. And if he is not, his retreat is not rejection. It is simply his psyche signaling that the work is not yet done. Jung called this process individuation, the path by which we become whole by integrating our unconscious material into conscious life. And often it begins not with solitude, but with a meeting, a connection so intense it breaks the ego's grip and demands transformation. In this light, a woman's calm authenticity becomes medicine, not through effort, not through pleasing, but through presence. She becomes unforgettable, not because she demanded attention, but because she reflected something he forgot he possessed. So, to the women listening, never underestimate the quiet power of your wholeness. The more you live in your essence, the more you become a mirror and a catalyst. And to the men, when you feel shaken by a woman who isn't trying to win, you pay attention. She may be awakening not desire, but your soul's longing for completion. This is not romantic fantasy. It is inner work disguised as connection. Because in the end, she was never just a woman. She was the doorway to yourself. There is a moment in every soul's journey when silence teaches more than words, and absence reveals more than presence ever could. For many men, the most transformative figure in their emotional history isn't the one who stayed through every storm. It's the woman who left in peace, not out of anger, but out of alignment with her deeper truth. Carl Jung reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And often, it takes the mysterious departure of a woman who embodied truth to shatter that unconscious narrative. Not because she broke his heart, but because she broke the mirror he was avoiding. You see, when a woman stands fully in her essence, unapologetically, silently, gracefully, she becomes not just a person, but a symbol. And symbols are the language of the unconscious. They don't fade. They echo. They live on in the psyche long after words are forgotten. This is why her memory lingers, why her energy remains, not because she performed, but because she reflected. And in doing so, she triggered what Jung called the individuation process, a reckoning with one's inner world, often catalyzed by loss, longing, or awakening. And yet the story is not tragic. On the contrary, it is redemptive. Because through this process, the man doesn't just grieve a relationship. He reclaims himself. He begins to peel back the layers he once used as armor. He stops looking for completion in someone else and begins seeking integration within. This is how the woman, without knowing it, becomes the beginning of everything, not the end. So, if you are that woman, the one who chose self-respect over pleasing silence over chaos, truth over performance, know this: you didn't disappear. You planted. And somewhere out there, your absence is growing roots in a man's awakening. And to the men listening, if you've ever felt undone by someone who didn't try to impress you, but simply existed in wholeness, don't dismiss it as coincidence. That disruption is your invitation, not to chase her, but to meet yourself. Because love, in the deepest Jungian sense, is never about possession. It is about transformation. And if this message resonated with something deep inside you, if it stirred questions, emotions, or even a sense of quiet recognition, you are not alone. You are on the threshold of something sacred, the journey into the self, and we are here to walk it with you. Let's continue this conversation. Have you ever been touched by someone in a way that words couldn't explain? Have you ever walked away from love not because you didn't care, but because staying meant betraying yourself? Or have you felt someone walk away from you, and only in their silence did you begin to hear your own soul? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs your reflection right now. And if this video helped you see your own relationships through a new lens, subscribe to the channel. We explore not just love, but the psychology behind it, the unconscious patterns, the healing, the becoming. Because here we don't chase perfection, we pursue wholeness. Subscribe, comment, reflect. Let this be more than a video. Let it be the start of your awakening.